I mean, I just don't think America can be called the most superior country on earth when people are dying because they can't afford medication.
I do. Yeah, for a couple of reasons. Not only because our healthcare is better than those countries. By the way, did you know that I'm Canadian? I was raised in Montreal.
Oh, nice.
So, the death rates, the survival rates of serious diseases in these countries, particularly in the UK, 7 times higher if you have a serious disease or being in an emergency room than it is in the United States. The wait times, depending on the parameters that you use, can be anywhere from 2 times as long to 4 times as long. The healthcare outcomes are not better in these countries. And by the way, they're largely beholden to us providing national security effectively for the whole world because they don't have to burden that cost. So not only do I believe that obviously our healthcare system is flawed, but not only do I believe that our healthcare system is superior to those countries, particularly the country from which I migrated, to Canada, to the United States, but there would be another reason outside of healthcare. Let's assume that healthcare were better in those countries. Freedom is a big one. How can a country be better than the United States if they don't allow freedom to their citizens?
I don't think America really allows freedom to their citizens either all the way. Because once you've committed a crime, your rights are stripped from you.
Right. But we do assume that we grant everyone, we don't give any rights, we grant, or recognize is the term I should use here, I want to pick my words very carefully, recognize God-given rights to human beings here in this country that no other country recognizes. Namely, freedom of speech is a big one. That doesn't exist in those countries that you just mentioned. Is that not a biggie?
I feel like freedom of speech is very important. But at the same time, it's like, this is getting into the whole like freedom of speech, hate speech thing, right? Like
No,
I mean like with freedom of speech being an important thing. I feel like there are certain things that are like more important than others.
Okay, so what's more important than the First Amendment?
Well,
what rights are more important than the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech, freedom of the press? What rights would you say are more important for a government to recognize?
The right to life.
Okay, that's also something that we recognize.
Yes, but not entirely. If you are too broke, then America just doesn't recognize your right to life. They might say they do, but then it's, you can't afford insulin, okay, you're gonna die now. You can't afford this medical procedure, okay, you're gonna die. Right.
I think you're misunderstanding here the difference between rights and commodities. Right? You have the right to live. You have the right to seek the best health care possible for yourself. You do not have the right to force someone else to provide you with health care. You do not have the right to have somebody else create, invest, go through red tape and FDA approval process, study, become a doctor, go to medical school, get hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt, and force them to provide you with medical procedures or drugs simply because you can't afford them. That is not a right. That's a good. That's a commodity.
But that's the thing, is I think that should be a right. You should have the right.
Doesn't mean that it is.
You should have the right, but that's exactly what I'm saying, though. That's why America's not the most superior, because they don't see that as a right.
Sure, but we do see, I would say this, and maybe we just won't be able to agree. Freedom of speech, to me, is more important. I think that's a much more valuable fundamental right than forcing somebody else to give me free health care. You disagree with that?
Well, I feel like, because I do feel like freedom of speech is an amazing thing. It's great that we're able to sit down and talk and have debates on whatever we want because we have that right.
Right.
But
and it doesn't exist in these other countries. We wouldn't be able to do this.
But I do believe like there's just a huge flaw in the fact that people are dying because they cannot afford things.
But more people are dying in these other countries because their healthcare systems are worse.
But
the mortality rates, the survival rates of diseases like cancer, terminal diseases, not to mention the diseases that are not being cured in these other countries, the major treatments are coming out of the United States because of medical innovation and research, which doesn't occur under a socialized system. So if you're talking about people dying because of healthcare, more people are dying because of lack of access to good care under socialized healthcare systems than the United States. No system is perfect. But are you willing to give up your freedom of speech, your Second Amendment rights, but let's just go with freedom of speech? You're willing to give that up for a worse healthcare outlook overall, provided that it's given to you at gunpoint by another taxpayer?
If I wasn't allowed to say certain things, like if I wasn't allowed to, I feel like there are things that people shouldn't be allowed to say.
Okay.
Is the thing. That's
so you
my
don't
stance.
support the first. So freedom of speech is not necessarily something you support. Now this. Okay.
I don't necessarily support people. People shouldn't be allowed to say. You shouldn't be allowed to like. I shouldn't be allowed to go around calling people the N-word.
Why not?
Because that's a slur. Like
Sure.
that's not something
Sure.
I should be allowed to say.
Why not?
Because that's an offensive word. That's a slur.
It's an offensive word, absolutely. Someone just called me a idiot. Right? Should I be able to have these guys haul them away in cuffs?
Well, no, I don't think cuffs is. That's.
Well, what do you do? What do you mean you shouldn't be allowed to say it? What should the ramifications? By the way, people shouldn't walk around calling black people the N-word, okay? I think we both agree on that. But you said people shouldn't be allowed to.
I think there should
Why
be. Why not? Because that's not okay. Like.
It's not nice. So what would you do to someone who uses the N-word? What should be done?
There should be like a small fine or something, like to like deter them from saying that. Like people shouldn't be allowed to call me a like that's a slur.
I think people should be allowed to. I think it's mean.
It's a word that's been used to oppress lesbians for like years. Like it shouldn't be allowed to be, you shouldn't be allowed to call a gay person a that's like not okay.
Why not?
Because
saying it's not okay or that it's wrong or that it's offensive doesn't mean that it's not a right. Why would you want to grant the right to legislate language to people in positions of power or authority?
I just feel like
you're giving that power away to the patriarchy.
Those words specifically dehumanize people.
Sure, but the point is, someone is going to be determining what language is allowed or not, right? You want to give that right over to the government.
Maybe not.
You want Donald Trump to determine what you can or cannot?
No, I don't want Donald Trump.
Okay,
I don't
so the
even
next
think
guy.
Donald Trump should be the president.
Well, who cares? So the point is.
I feel like that's part of why America isn't superior is because of Trump.
But the point is, right now, it's going to go straight to the top. You want him in charge of language?
No, I feel like it should be like a national vote. Like that's what I think.
So do you believe that all rights come from a national vote?
Well, no, but
Okay.
I feel like certain things should.
Well, okay, let me give you this as an example. In these other countries like Canada, where I come from, you have comedians who've been jailed for offensive jokes. There's actually a friend of mine named Mike Ward who was put before Human Rights Tribunal and I believe fined $150,000 or $50,000 for a joke that offended a kid from a Make-A-Wish Foundation. You have people who are arrested left and right in Europe. In the UK, there was a man who was actually, I believe, fined because he was doing a cover of Kung Fu Fighting at a karaoke bar, and an Asian person said that that was offensive to him. When you have the government determining what language is and is not acceptable, that's a very dangerous precedent to set. Where's the line? What you find offensive might not be offensive to someone else. What someone else finds offensive, who may be in power for those 4 years, may be completely acceptable to you. Why would you support giving that right over to the government? Furthermore, most movements, civil rights movements, the LGBT movement, right, the gay pride movement, these movements have been created by people who would be presumed to be underclass or the oppressed, right? And they did it through language. They did it non-violently. They got legislation passed. Why would you want to strip them of their language or grant the authority to the government to strip minorities of their language?
I'm saying that we should make it to where people that aren't of the minority can't call the people of the minority slurs against that minority.
But minorities and majorities change all the time, right? That's the whole point to a constitutional republic, to protect the rights of the minority from a majority. Anytime you grant the government the right to legislate speech, it ends badly. It's never ended well. So I just want to make sure that maybe we can move on to another issue of discussion. You believe that these countries are better than the United States because they have socialized healthcare, and it seems to me like you believe that they're better than the United States because they don't have freedom of speech.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, like, I feel like no country has done freedom of speech stuff correctly. I'll say that.
I would say the United States.
Because, like, I'll say, like, the woman who's jailed when she has, like, a child and a breastfeeding kid because she called a trans woman a man, she shouldn't have been jailed. Like, that's not okay. Like, I feel like there's a, like...
It's ma'am. You saw that video, too?
Yes, I did.
Now, is that a slur? I'm making fun of that guy.
Oh, no. I feel like...
But he does.
Trans women aren't oppressed.
Well, he feels that way.
Yeah,
they feel that
does.
way. There are language
laws. But they're
laws.
white men, for the most part.
What if it's a black transgender?
they're men for the
Who
most
wins
part.
who wins the oppression Olympics if it's a black transgender with rickets? The point is, you can't deter. This is the problem with identity politics, right? You just said, well, no, hold on a second. So, because he's a white man, he's not oppressed. Well, he thinks that, and you have these bills, you have these pieces of legislation that are being proposed that would outlaw misgendering people. I mean, you see that in Canada,
And that's
right?
an awful thing. 'Cause
Why is it awful?
That's not oppression.
They see it as oppression.
Because someone called them the wrong gender. I've been called a dude before, multiple times.
I don't know. I hope maybe that was a guy who was hitting you on the scooter. Could have been drunk. I would never confuse you for a dude.
But like, so what? Like, that's not the same as like someone tried to like. Someone
But they
literally
want
came
to
up and,
literally take your rights away. They want to do the exact same thing to you that you want to do to people who might use the word or you understand?
But I've been hit before with the word being hurled at me.
But they've been hit with someone calling them a tranny, or they've been hit with, God
See,
forbid,
I don't think tranny
being called
should
a
be
man.
called.
Being called man instead of ma'am. The point is they want to do the exact same thing to you, remove your right to speak as you would do with other people. Do you see the danger in that?
Watch Good Morning Mug Club live every Monday through Thursday at 10:15 Eastern.